What's up, everybody? I like Doctor Who. And I like modern Doctor Who too. Of course, it is not as good as the original, but it does have its moments, and overall, it's pretty good. But which era is the best? Gee, I wonder. Maybe it will be the title of the video. Okay, guys, I'll drop the pretense. I don't know how to make an intro to this video. I guess I'll just start here. Doctor Who is a British science fiction TV show about a random guy in time and space called Doctor Who. It's 60 years old, but is commonly split into two parts: new and original. Original was from 1963 to 1989, and new was from 2005 to right now. And this video is basically going to serve as an excuse for me to gush about the second era of the new show, because I feel like it. A few months ago now, I made a video talking about the third era of the new show, which is criticized a lot and I feel mostly unjustly. Yeah, it has its problems, and this era, which I'm about to talk about right now, also has its problems, because everything has problems. But personally, I believe that people go a bit overboard when it comes to this one. And so I just had to make a video to remind people, you know, it's pretty good, it's not that bad. And so this video will serve in a way as that one's spiritual successor, in that I'm going to be using that same format where I talk about why I like a certain era of the show over a very long period of time. Except this time, instead of being controversial and explaining why I like something that's kind of unpopular, now I'm just going to be talking about why the Moffat era is the best. Because it is. Or it's my favorite, should I say. You know, opinions, all that shit, you know what I'm saying. But genuinely, yeah, in all the videos, I feel like I keep saying that the Stephen Moffat era is my favorite of the modern show, but I never quite get around to explaining why. I mostly just say it's very good and leave it at that. And so, well, I do make Doctor Who videos, and I am very bored, so just let me gush, man, please. Thank you. So with all that out of the way, let's just start. Let's get into why Stephen Moffat is my favorite writer of the new show. Stephen Moffat was born in 1961, holy shit this guy is old, and was the head writer and executive producer on Doctor Who from 2010 to 2017. Holy shit, that's a long time. And I really like him, I think he's really cool. He's definitely up there as one of my favorite writers in the modern series of the show. In fact, he's basically tied number one, or at least I would say he's number one if Robert Sherman didn't exist. And that's basically because, simply put, he just scratches that itch, man. He gets what the show is about, because this man right here, as much as he wants to pretend otherwise, is a fucking no. He's a fan too, and we all know it. Now, a lot of people might use the term fan fiction as an insult when describing the modern series of Doctor Who, because I mean it pretty much is fan fiction. But I take it the opposite way. I see it as inspirational, that anyone, even a random fan of the show, can write their own stories and it can be just as good, you know, not quite as good, but still pretty good as the actual show, as the original show. And so, you know, from just like a principle starting point, I'm already on this guy's side. It's very easy to root for him. It also helps that he's very clever. He's got a big brain, a massive brain, big intellect. It's very funny. You wouldn't think this, but the guy actually got his start in sitcoms, in comedy. And when you got that context in your mind, a lot of the other stuff, you know, a lot of his works, they start to make a lot more sense. It makes a lot of sense why he's always putting in gags at every single opportunity, regardless of whether it's appropriate or not. But it is funny though, so who cares? It may sound like I'm being a bit bantery, you know, poking a little bit of fun at Mr. Moffat. I really do love this guy. I'm being so for real, because he has a skill which a lot of writers don't necessarily have. That being, he's very good at writing. Stephen Moffat's first episode of the show was called The Empty Child, and released in 2005 in Doctor Who's first series, Series 1. It's the first ever series of Doctor Who. There actually was never any other series before this one. And I mean, just from this one episode, I think you can get why a lot of people, myself included, really gravitate towards this guy's writing style. I mean, it's funny, it's unique, it's edgy, it's creepy, it's dark, it's funny. Did I say that one already? And it is fantastical. It's got that science fiction element, it's got that horror element, and it's got that fantasy element. It can be really hard to actually distill what Doctor Who, you know, is. because it's a show with a 60-year-long history. If you've heard me waffle on for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours about this show, you will come to realize that there is basically nothing consistent about it whatsoever. It's constantly changing, and that means new iterations of the same ideas, which means you can't really say that Doctor Who is, insert blank here, about anything. I mean, you can't say Doctor Who is necessarily funny, because sometimes it's not. It's not necessarily scary, because sometimes it's not. It's not necessarily light-hearted or fun or happy, because sometimes it's not, but it's definitely not dark or brooding or serious, even though it sometimes is. It's a contradiction. The whole show is a contradiction. I mean, you can go back to the third Doctor's era, and he is an anti-establishment figure. His whole identity is an oxymoron, and that's kind of just the whole show, which leaves a lot of fans picking and choosing what they love about the show, because that's only natural. For example, I myself tend to gravitate towards the alien invasion type story, you know, the stuff you'd see in the early 70s with UNIT. That's like my shit right there. That's like my type of story. I love that shit. But Stephen Moffat is very clearly more inspired by the season 13, season 14, more darker but still fantastical. Tom Baker lights up the whole room with the glow from his teeth, but also the stories are hauntingly frightening. That also I must confess I'm a big fan of too. If you don't know me, my two favorite seasons of Doctor Who are season 8 with Jon Pertwee and season 14 with Tom Baker. Those are, in my opinion, the epitome. But Stephen Moffat's favorite story, The Ark in Space, is very clearly an inspiration for pretty much everything he does going forward, because it's not like he's copying The Ark in Space. It's not like he's copying that era or what that era was trying to do. Instead, he's just extrapolating his favorite parts out of that and then putting it into something that's totally new and unique that he then recycles a billion other times, because Stephen Moffat only tells the same story. But we love him for it. I love him for it. Stephen Moffat has a very particular voice. Very snarky, very funny, very daring, which again, it might seem a bit oxymoronic that someone who's daring only ever tells the same story just with different set dressing. But I'll get into that, don't worry. This is a long video, okay? Buckle up, people. But what I'm trying to say is that the reason Stephen Moffat is so popular among fans is because he is extrapolating a lot of Doctor Who fans' favorite moments of the original run and then repackaging them into something that's, you know, maybe a little bit more modern. Something old, something new, something blue. That's a reference right there. And basically, he also just seems like a pretty cool guy, you know what I'm saying? The Empty Child and the Doctor Dances was a very successful episode of the show, with Christopher Eccleston actually stating that it is his favorite episode of the show. And I mean, it would be my favorite of series 1 as well if, you know, Dalek didn't exist. God damn it, Rob Shearman, he's too good! And it also set the tone, as it were, for all of Stephen Moffat's works going forward. But before we talk about that, let's jump ahead to next year. The Girl in the Fireplace, another really successful episode of the show, and one which I mean, I still like it, but it's probably my least favorite Stephen Moffat before he becomes showrunner, you know what I mean? I mean, that's still choosing from a pretty good selection. But here Stephen Moffat establishes his timey-wimey time travel, old, new, unique aesthetic, as it were, you know, the clockwork robots. That's a really unique idea, really striking visual, not just with the mask, but without the mask too, and the body horror aspects of the Madame de Pompadour ship, as well as the time travel aspects. All of this stuff is going to be repeated again and again, folks, so don't worry, we're going to get to it. And I think before we get to his third and most popular story, I think I should establish right now that there is a poetry to Stephen Moffat's writings, which may seem like a con, and sometimes I use it as a joke, you know, I've already used that as a joke, saying, oh, Stephen Moffat, he only tells the same story. But in reality, I fucking love that he only tells the same story, because it means there are repeated motifs, repeated stylization choices, and just a general understanding of the show that I repeatedly click with and appreciate. He just gets the show. Me and him are on the same wavelength, and it would definitely be hypocritical of me to say that he repeats himself all the time, because I fucking repeat myself all the time too. He does it better though. His next story then blew everything out of the water. It's the highest rated Doctor Who episode of all time according to review sites. It's Blink. We all love it. We all love it. Famously, I said I didn't love this one. I gave it a 7 out of 10 shock horror. I know. But I don't know, man. The Doctor's not in it. I'm kidding. There are actual reasons that I've given a million times in previous other videos why this episode isn't, you know, breaking the top of my list. Certainly not bad. Just in no reality is this episode bad. But at the same time, is it #1 episode of all time level? I don't know. Isn't this meant to be a video praising Stephen Moffat? Don't worry, folks. I'm critical of him now, so when the glazing starts 5 minutes later, you don't think I am just that much of a complete shell. You guys ain't ready. That being said, Blink is still an achievement in storytelling. It's one of the most unique Doctor Who episodes ever. The Weeping Angels are an amazing villain that I personally think get better with each subsequent appearance. I actually completely move away from the crowd who say that they were best in this story. Hell no. But they're still a really frightening and, well, I don't know. I mean, I personally don't find them frightening. They're a really effective and compelling villain, you know? I mean, just the imagery of it, the idea. I made a whole video on the Weeping Angels. You can check that out. But Sally Sparrow to even that character, Larry Nightingale, these are all really well-established characters for what they had, you know, 45 minutes. Tells a really unique story that is able to get a lot of people who wouldn't normally watch a Doctor Who episode, watching a Doctor Who episode and enjoying it. And, you know, I imagine this was the first episode of many people and they really liked it and then they went on to watch Doctor Who. And so for that, I've just got to be eternally grateful. The use of time travel is very unique in the story and it won him many awards and accolades. And so what do I know about anything? Which leads us in to Series 4, Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead. Stephen Moffat's final story before becoming showrunner of Doctor Who. Here we see a lot of, again, themes, recurring motifs that are going to be cropping up again and again. The idea of an artificial afterlife, the repeated catchphrases that we've already seen before in the Are You My Mummy, to an extent with the Weeping Angels to the Don't Blink, the gimmick of the villains, hey, who turned out the lights, etc, etc. And of course, the introduction of the wonderful character River Song as played by the ever amazing Alex Kingston. She's great. This episode is great. What more do I even say? A lot. I think it's at this point where a lot of people in the fandom really got what Stephen Moffat was about. They really began to understand the patterns of these stories, and a lot of them, myself included, were very excited at the news that he would be becoming the new head writer, showrunner of Doctor Who, because a lot of people, again myself included, really vibed with his vision of the show, with his understanding of the show, combining past and present and future elements all together to create a more idealistic reimagining of what the classic show, in particular season 12 to season 14, were kind of about, distilling that through a modern lens and then turning it into something totally completely new. The quality of Stephen Moffat's episodes came from not just his skill as a writer, but his appreciation of what came before, of Doctor Who in general. I mean, you can just feel it when you watch that scene in The Empty Child where the Doctor's phone rings, or when the Doctor's on the other side of the door and the empty child is seen through the shadow saying, "Please let me in, Mummy, I'm scared of the bombs."
Please let me in, Mummy, I'm scared of the bombs.
There's something just so Doctor Who about both of those scenes, but also it was totally unprecedented. It was like the DNA of the show, but something we'd never seen before. And that right there is why it's so goddamn good. I do disagree with the assertion that Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who was a breath of fresh air. I would personally argue that Russell T Davies' Doctor Who is more so befitting of the label a breath of fresh air, because Stephen Moffat, a lot of what he's doing is actually playing on preconceptions about the show. It works better if you are a fan of the show. Stephen Moffat's writing style appeals more to people who already like Doctor Who, whereas maybe people who aren't as into the show, you know, idiots, would connect more with Russell T Davies' more distant, more different version of Doctor Who. By the way, I'm not hating on Russell T Davies. You guys know I like Russell T Davies as well, right? But there is a clear, very clear difference in, say, season 26 and series 1. They're almost incomparable, and an episode like Rose just could not fit into the original series, no matter what. It bears similarities very superficially to Spearhead from Space. That's about it. Whereas I would argue that The Empty Child, The Girl in the Fireplace, Blink, Silence in the Library, Forest of the Dead, all of those stories could have worked in the original series. So I don't think Stephen Moffat is necessarily a breath of fresh air, and I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I definitely don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a great thing, and that's why why I don't get sick of the fact that all of his stories are exactly the same. Because that's part of the charm, man. You don't get it. He has a very particular way of writing these stories, and I lap it up every time. Come on, man, give me the money. Oh, and also he writes Sherlock too. Sherlock is a very odd TV show, especially as a Doctor Who fan, because it's kind of nothing like the original Sherlock Holmes, whilst also being shockingly similar to Doctor Who. It's very strange. I know I'm cutting ahead a little bit. I'm skipping over series 5 to talk about Sherlock. Don't worry guys, I'm gonna go in detail over everything. But Sherlock is a very important show to discuss when talking about Stephen Moffat. I mean, it's his second most popular project, I suppose. Yeah, it is. And it's also co-produced by Mark Gatiss, another funny Doctor Who writer who I love very much. Which is why I really don't think it is a stretch for me to say that Sherlock, the BBC reimagining of Sherlock Holmes in the modern day, has more in common with Doctor Who than the original source material, to the point where it's stranger when they intentionally try to differ apart than when they're similar. I.e., my brother actually pointed this one out to me, in The Snowman, the episode where the Doctor pretends to be Sherlock Holmes, Murray Gold plays a very distinctly not Sherlock Holmes theme, which just seems a bit weird. Why don't you just lean into it, you know what I mean?
Shut up, I'm making deductions, it's very exciting.
Of course, Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss are very consciously trying to separate the two works. They aren't intentionally trying to make them similar, but I feel like it has almost the opposite effect. We're going to be talking a lot in this video. It's not a Sherlock video, but we are going to be talking a lot in this video about Sherlock and how it influences the actual show, which is why I think it is important to bring it up here before we dive into the depths of series 5, which is the best modern Doctor Who series ever. Series 5 begins. Whoa. You think I can just jump into it like that? We're missing precious context here, people. I know I talked about it briefly, but it really can't be understated how perception of the original Russell T Davies 1 era of the show, aka 2005 to 2009, formed the perception of Doctor Who Series 5 going into it. It was a Herculean task following up from the immensely successful David Tennant run of the show, to the point where allegedly there were talks inside the BBC internally of cancelling the show. Now, I imagine it was probably brought up, but I find it very unlikely that that was ever meant to happen. In a similar vein to how, even though it was brought up in rumours to have been, mentioned in 2021 as well, I don't think it happened there either. There's too much contradictory information to suggest that the BBC would actually cancel Doctor Who. I mean, it is their biggest worldwide brand. Like, what else do the BBC have? Fucking nothing. And from a lot of things I've been able to gather from behind the scenes of both this case and the 2021 case, there is contradictory evidence that indicates more than likely there was a just regular smooth transition of authority leadership. I don't know. And I think my favorite example of that is actually the commentary track for Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead. Yes, I know guys, I know what you're thinking. Yes, I am that big a nerd, because I do know that I'm about to geek out over a fucking commentary track. But just hear me out, okay? This is a commentary track for one of my favorite episodes of the modern series that has Stephen Moffat, Russell T Davies, and David Tennant, okay, the three big dogs. And it is so fucking funny. This is one of the best commentary tracks I've ever listened to, and yes, I am sad to say that I am such a Doctor Who fucking nerd that I have actually listened to every single Doctor Who commentary. Yes, I know. Say what you will, but I had a wonderful time, okay? Not only have I watched every Doctor Who episode twice, I have also listened to every Doctor Who commentary track. I mean, guys, can you blame me? It's got the three big dogs. Little side note, just putting this in randomly in here. I got nowhere else to talk about this. You guys don't know how excited I was when I found a link to these old commentary tracks, alternate commentary tracks to the ones that I have on my DVDs for all of the episodes from 2005 to 2000. You guys don't even know how excited I was. I thought I was done. I thought that I had finished all of the things, and then just by pure coincidence, I found out, hell no, there was actually more. Round 2. So yes, if you're like me and you want to listen to all of the commentary tracks in Doctor Who, then just search them up. You can find a bunch online. What the fuck was I talking about? Oh yeah.
Hello, faithful viewer. I am Russell T Davies. I'm the executive producer of this episode, but never mind that. Let me introduce you to I'm Stephen Moffat. Russell is currently the executive producer, I think is what he meant to say. I wrote this episode while sharpening a knife behind his back. Let me hand you over to...
My name's David Tennant, and I'm keeping out of this.
Which one of us do you love most?
Yeah. Who's best? Whose bits were best? Okay, list your favourite episodes in an order that will allow you to survive this room.
To me, it seems very clear that Stephen Moffat was always going to take over from Russell T Davies, and there was never really any plan to cancel the show. But what I do find interesting, especially about this commentary track, is that there was a period of time where David Tennant wasn't going to leave the show. Potentially, David Tennant was going to stay alongside Carey Mulligan. Is that her name? I'm thinking about it from memory. She played Sally Sparrow. So yeah, maybe that was going to be the potential Series 5. Now that I do know did not last long, because David Tennant did eventually just say, you know what, fuck it, I've been Doctor Who long enough. But nerd emoji raising finger, at the time of this commentary track being made, that decision had not been reached yet. So it's a very interesting dynamic. It's also very funny.
It does feel like I'm sitting in a small room with two presidents of the High Council of Gallifrey.
Yes, doesn't it all?
Who are you, Andred?
Who's Barusa and who's Flavia?
Oh, I'm Flavia. Come on. Give me that.
Can we both be Barusa? There's lots of Barusas.
There are lots of Barusas.
Leonard Sachs.
Yeah.
See, I was like John Arnott myself.
Which one's he?
Which one's
Oh,
he?
Fred, what do you mean, which one's he? Oh, for goodness sake.
I really could listen to these three speak all day. But the point I'm trying to make is that you can't ignore Russell T Davies 1 when talking about the Moffat era that followed, especially Series 5, because expectations were sky goddamn high, and it would have been very easy for Stephen Moffat to fumble the bag. Matt Smith, as you know, killed my son. He's a fraud. He stole the role from me. I was actually meant to be the 11th Doctor. That's a fun fact for you. But especially after David Tennant, he really was in the hot seat. I mean, all eyes were on him, and all eyes were on the writing and the production crew and everything, because this show had to be perfect to keep going. And thankfully, for all of us, it was. Series 5, in my opinion, is the peak of modern Doctor Who. The epitome, in my opinion, it is basically perfect. I love every episode here. Now, I don't love them all to the exact same standards. The Beast Below, an episode I do still really like, is probably the weakest of the season, even though Stephen Moffat, you're way too harsh to that episode, man. It's a great episode, man. What the hell are you talking about? But when we get to like the canopy of quality that this series has, oh my god, we are talking about some heavy fucking hitters. And overall, the arc, all of the characters introduced, the visual style, just the complete objective upgrade in visuals from series 4 to 5, man. Holy shit. Basically everything here is amazing and arguably better, in fact, in my opinion, just straight up objectively better than anything that came before. And keep in mind, everything that came before was immensely popular and beloved. But for now, instead, let's talk about the 11th hour, because this story, holy shit, this is how you do an introduction. I feel it is not an unpopular opinion at all for me to say that the 11th hour is an absolutely brilliant character introduction for the 11th Doctor. A brilliant premiere and one of the best seasonal openers in the entirety of modern Doctor Who. It has a certain spark to it, an infectious energy that it maintains throughout the entire 45-minute run. I'm pretty sure it's 45 minutes, that episode might be a bit longer. It is visually stunning, especially when compared to what came before. It's unique in style, it has a lot of really wonderful set pieces, the writing is sharp, witty, and just perfectly efficient. So many quotable lines, so many funny moments, so many epic moments, so many action moments, so many scary, but it's got everything, man. It literally has got everything. The opening with Amelia Pond sets up the entire story of the season, even with hints to the final episode thrown in at the end there. Amy's character is so perfectly set up in that we see what she was before, and then we get to see who she turned into, and we see how the Doctor's interactions with her at a young age turned her into who she was. I mean, it's just perfect, man. Prisoner Zero is a great monster design in my opinion. Yeah, some of the special effects don't quite hold up, but I literally don't care. And it's spooky. I mean, I was spooked out with the Silence Will Fool thing all the way back when, I remember. And the Atraxi themselves are also just a wonderful design. The imagery of the eye through the crack It really is the perfect intro episode. Can't ask for more. I mean, they even have that epic shot where it's all of the other Doctors. I live for that shit, man. Murray Gold has totally switched up styles, and it brings a whole new energy to the series and era as a whole. I really do love Murray Gold. There are so many songs here that just fill me with every kind of emotion. I sadly can't play all of the ones that I want to play, but I think you guys probably get the gist. And if you want a clear example of what I'm talking about, you can go to the Murray Gold YouTube channel and you can listen for yourself. It is really goddamn good. And I don't think that I can stress enough just how important it is to the whole vibe of the series. Music is one of the most important things when creating a TV show. And Murray Gold brings in just something truly special. There is a reason that they play I Am the Doctor at least 3 times every episode this series. And that's because it's cool as fuck. Of course, I'm sounding like a broken record at this point, but the rest of the series is just as fire too. The Beast Below, I was a tiny little bit mean to it earlier by saying that it isn't as good as some of the best episodes of the modern show, but it is still really goddamn good. I recently put this on my top 10 most underrated episodes. I don't know if that's exactly true, but if you've got the actual creator, the writer of the episode coming out and saying how it sucks, I mean, he's just wrong. Stephen Moffat, you are wrong. In fact, you know what? Fuck it, man. Just play what I said in my top 10 underrated videos. Just play that shit back right here. I think a lot of the hate towards this episode actually comes from Stephen Moffat saying that it's his least favorite, or that his son didn't like it, which is a shame because it's pretty damn brilliant. The opening still holds up visually for me, and the sense of adventure in early series 5 is something truly marvelous every time I go back to watch it. Unlike series 7B, which has a nice vibe in terms of chill, casual adventures, almost like Doctor Who on autopilot, akin to season 17 or something of the like. Series 5 feels like a series that is completely locked in, i.e. season 12, where every episode is quintessential Doctor Who, and this one is no exception. The world building here is top notch. Starship UK is brought to life so convincingly, even down to these benches that they used to sit on. Sounds like a weird thing to be impressed by, I know, but I really like these benches, okay? This scene where Amy sees the Doctor show up on the scanner and how this moment is called back to in Face the Raven, it's cinema, man. It's cinema. Stephen Moffat understands the character of the Doctor, has created such a compelling new character in Amy Pond, has imagined a world that relates to our own, and he does it all so casually, as if it's just any other episode. A whole story where the companion is in her 90, an episode with a strong emotional core, funny set pieces, and a memorable monster, pressing social commentary, and strong humour throughout. Genuine banger. Big thumbs up from me. And you know what? Tied number 9 spot, Victory of the Daleks, man. Teased at the end of this last episode. I have always loved this one. Always and forever. Yes, another Mark Gatiss episode, and probably my favourite of his Doctor Who's. Although Robot of Sherwood could also make a spot on this list. I personally think that's a great story, but I haven't heard anyone disagree, meaning it probably wouldn't quite fit on the list. Victory of the Daleks, on the other hand, I remember this one being quite controversial for some reason. The Paradigm Daleks are fucking awesome, man. Stephen Moffat says they're not. I don't know why this dude is his own biggest hater, but they're goddamn cool, man. I feel like you could find a comment from Stephen Moffat where he says at each point that he doesn't like anything to do with Doctor Who, really. He says the Daleks are silly, the Master is silly, his own episodes are silly. He really is a Doctor Who fan, I guess. My goat. See, this is why I'm here. He hates on it, so I don't have to. Which takes us into Victory of the Daleks, which I also talked about in that other video, because how the hell does this episode get flack? I just don't get it. Maybe my mindset's in a different place. This episode's like fucking peak. I mean, it's just a great episode. I wonder if I really could, you know, do a massive deep dive delve into every single one of these stories in series 5, because there really is a lot here. Victory of the Daleks isn't just rerun of Power of the Daleks. It isn't just pastiche of war films in the 1940s or all of that, or stuff you'd see on bank holidays. It's like like a full merger. As I said, it's something old, something new, something blue. There's multiple storylines, and not just like an A story and a B story. There's like multiple different arcs that are all layered on top of each other, that are all chugging along throughout the whole series. In a way, these first 3 episodes are a mini arc with Amy and the Doctor before Rory gets involved. They're setting the scene after series 1 to 4, the David Tennant era. They're resetting things. They're bringing them back to a state of new normalcy. Layers and elements going on here that all just kind of settle and merge into creating 3 very, very highly enjoyable episodes of Doctor Who that you can just binge in a row. And then the series never loses that momentum. In fact, I would argue that the 2-parter that follows, The Time of Angels, is actually a marginal step above of anything we've seen so far in the series. Which is high praise, I know, because I've just, spent the last, 10 minutes slurping, just straight slurping, doing tricks on it, everything. Pause! But in my opinion, it is here, 4 episodes in, where the Stephen Moffat era proves itself to be my favourite, with all of the other episodes as well, all building up to this one. This 2-parter, in my opinion, that establishes what we're gonna get from the Moffat era. Because the episodes up to this point, they've mostly been about setting things up. They've been really enjoyable, very high quality, as I've already established, but they're kind of laying the groundwork. And when I say laying the groundwork, I mean laying the groundwork for this. Because when we all first heard that Stephen Moffat was gonna become showrunner of Doctor Who, what was the story that we all first imagined? Okay, well, maybe I'm speaking for other people, but I definitely imagined the sequel to Blink. I thought it was inevitable. And so imagine my shock when I saw the early set photos released all the way back in 2010. Oh my God, it feels like so long ago. And I saw this image, the Doctor, Amy, I didn't actually know that she was called Amy back then, and River Song, with a new TARDIS as well. Oh my God, I did love that TARDIS. And they were filming the Weeping Angels 2-parter. It just seems like a no-brainer, after the success of Blink, the success of Silence in the Library, you take out the Weeping Angels, you take out River Song, and you smush them all together into just a complete epic. This story is so goddamn good. I have no idea how people can say that Blink is better than it. It just seems like a no-brainer. If Blink is the Alien film, Time of Angels is Aliens. And boy, do I love Aliens.
Game over, man. It's game over.
It also sets up the Anglican Marines, which come back again and again throughout the whole... Well, actually, they come back even beyond the Stephen Moffat arc. And it's just, in general, a very tight and tense and just wonderfully written episode of Doctor Who. I suppose some people can complain about the Weeping Angel moving if you only care about small things and not the fact that the whole episode is absolutely amazing.
So what if the gravity fails?
I thought about that. And we'll all plunge to our death. See, I thought about it.
And again, we see Stephen Moffat's attention to detail, his fan brain kicking in, with the Matt Smith with a coat Doctor coming in to console Amy and tell her some cryptic things about remembering, but him not telling her what to remember? I don't know. Now, I actually didn't notice this, I must confess, fake fan, until the finale, where it was revealed that this is actually the future Doctor coming back in time. Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey. You see what I mean? I just love this guy. He gets what the fans want from the show, to feel very smart whilst not actually being very smart, which is actually an accurate tagline for not just me, but every Doctor Who fan. Series 5 continues on with The Vampires of Venice, another outstanding story. I really love this one. And then Amy's Choice, which is actually so good, I'm going to talk about it in an upcoming video. Safe to say, I love that one too. But the next story that I'm going to talk about in depth is The Hungry Earth and Cold Blood, because this story, in my opinion, is actually very special. It's written by Chris Chibnall. You guys know I love Chris Chibnall, but also it reintroduces the Silurians. Now, throughout the entirety of the Russell T Davies 1 era, we had slowly been getting hints at stuff from the past. Of course, we got the Daleks, we got the Cybermen, and we got the Master. Those were the big 3. They all got introduced. The Sontarans got absolutely scammed. They got screwed over so hard, and the Macra in Gridlock was also brought back. But outside of that, and I suppose Sarah Jane and K9, there hadn't really been much done to bring back more niche, more obscure things from Doctor Who's past. and we had the macra, which I mean, I do love myself some macra. I mean, what is macra? But outside of that, us fans hadn't really gotten a bone to chew on, and it was with the reintroduction of the Silurians, which were definitely at the time not as well known. But they're actually going to be in the next Stephen Moffat story now that I think about it. Definitely a big deal at the time. As a kid, I can safely say the Silurians were one of my favorite monsters. I really loved their design. I even liked their Warriors of the Deep design, although I didn't watch that episode until way later on. I mostly just watched the original Doctor Who and the Silurians. And so I remember when this design was unveiled, I didn't actually quite appreciate it at the time because I was sad they didn't have a blue third eye. That's what I really wanted to happen. But it really was a monumental moment in the history of Doctor Who. Even if the episode is pretty much just a remake of that first story, it's still really goddamn good though. People downplay these episodes. I don't know why. I think it's because they hate Chris General because he's a cool guy. I don't know. I mean, how can you hate this guy? And it has one of my favorite endings of the modern show ever. I sadly can't play the audio of the clip because of copyright, but you guys all know what I mean. This shit is fucking gas. And it ties into something else that I also want to talk about when it comes to the Moffat era. That being hype. Hype is a very odd thing to talk about when it comes to Doctor Who, especially in recent years. Now, I do personally love myself some Power of the Doctor, but outside of that, I feel like hype has kind of been missing from Doctor Who for a very long time. Now, I don't necessarily equate hype with quality, although hype can be very good. Usually though, I would more so say that hype is a very useful tool that can be used to mask certain cracks in maybe certain projects, maybe a few flaws. You can overlook them if something is hype enough. And while some people might use that as a criticism, I actually think it's perfectly valid because hype as a concept is actually really difficult to generate, or at least generate well enough that people are willing to overlook certain flaws because something is hype enough. Again, it's a really difficult concept to talk about because a lot of people, when they talk about Doctor Who, they focus strictly on the quality. Is it well written? Is it blah blah blah? Is it insert random arbitrary selection here? But something I haven't seen anyone talk about recently is Doctor Who hype? Because it should be, and it could be, and it can be, and it should be. Because a lot of my favorite moments from especially the modern era of the show are the ones that are hype. Classic Doctor Who, it doesn't really get hype very much, and that's perfectly fine. It's just not the type of show to. But modern Doctor Who is the type of show to, and I think that's very cool. And it's kind of been lost in recent years, and when wondering why, I think back to how in Series 10 they revealed that the John Sim Master was going to be in it in the trailer, you know. It's just not very hype. And I think that distinction becomes clear when you compare the ending of Cold Blood to the ending of, say, Empire of Death. The tease at the end of Empire of Death just isn't that exciting, and that isn't really a damning indictment of Series 14. As I say, it's really difficult to generate hype, which is why it excuses hype being used as something that can cover up flaws in the actual storytelling of the episode, movie, project, whatever. The main example I think about usually is stuff like Infinity War, Endgame, or Spider-Man No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home especially is a movie with a kind of nonsensical plot, Endgame as well to a lesser extent, but all three of these movies have kind of noticeable flaws that get completely drowned out in how unbelievably fucking hype they are. And while some people might use that as a criticism against these movies or projects, the point I'm trying to make is that it's actually really difficult to generate the hype necessary for people to overlook certain flaws within the story. Empire of Death wasn't able to do that, whereas Stephen Moffat, especially in Series 5, and honestly right up until pretty much the end, even Series 10 actually, you know, I was ranking on it earlier, but yeah, Series 10, throw that in there as well. Stephen Moffat is able to utilize and generate and create hype in such a consistent and wonderful way that I do feel is kind of lacking from the show now, guys. Come on, man, turn the hype up. What I'm trying to say is that this ending is hype as shit, and Vincent and the Doctor is also really good. What more can be said about this episode? Everyone's crying. They're crying at the lodger as well. It's both really good episodes. Which brings us to the finale. The Pandora opens and the Big Bang. Both written by Stephen Moffat and just an absolute masterclass in storytelling. A resolution to the whole series, payoff to every single one of the questions, or pretty much every single one of the questions. We go back to all of the episodes. Every single episode gets a reference in at least one of the stories. Recurring characters show their faces again. We have an epic collage of villains from all across the show's history. Already just one series in to the new era, we have a collection of new rogues to add to the Russell T Davies established. Series 5 really feels like it's building off of Series 4 whilst also being something entirely new. And both the Pandora opens and its second part, The Big Bang, are incredibly clever, very satisfying, and just peak episodes of Doctor Who. I mean, they just got everything in check, and the whole thing comes full circle. The entire series took place over the course of one night. We finally get Amy's wedding. The married couple then go off in the TARDIS. We figuratively and literally reboot the Doctor Who universe. In my opinion, that final sequence where the Doctor picks up the phone, talks about the mummy on the Orient Express, and then Amy says goodbye to the house, they leave in the TARDIS, and then that transitions directly into the title sequence. In my opinion, that is some of the most sleek, professional, well-made, just frankly awesome Doctor Who ever put to screen. And yes, I will include that with the original series. I'll put it up there, man. That sequence is a fucking masterpiece. It needs to be studied, man. It's just so good. Okay, so you remember how 2 seconds ago I said Series 5 was the perfect continuation of Series 4? And it was like a seamless through line between them, even though there was a drastic shift in writing style, visual style, acting style, everything style. Well, forget all that, because Series 6 is something totally different. I've frequently said, again and again, since forever, that Doctor Who is a show unlike any other. It truly is unique in that it isn't really one long continuous show, even though it is. Doctor Who is a collection of oxymorons, or as I call them, quirks. And one of those oxymorons is that despite being one continuous long story, it is actually a bunch of small self-contained stories, those being each era of the show. It's a show comprised of a bunch of little shows, and in a similar vein, I think you can describe Series 1 to 4 of modern Doctor Who and Series 5 to 10 as being basically just totally different. I mean, they both have the Doctor, and they're both set in time and space, and they have some crossover, but outside of that, these are basically just completely different shows. And Series 6 is kind of the point where that becomes obvious. At least in Series 5, they were kind of trying to keep the pretense that this is like continuing on from Series 4. Series 6 is like totally its own thing, which I suppose makes sense because they rebooted literally the entire universe at the end of the last series, which I don't know how I'm still having to explain this to people over 14 years later. But yes, Stephen Moffat rebooting the universe is him getting away from the Series 1 to 4 of modern Doctor Who. He's literally making his own continuity. And people complain about the Timeless Child retcon. Ah ha 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 ha. See, I got it in there, guys. I mentioned it. But whereas Series 1 to 4 have a natural power creep following what I like to call the Dalek story arc, Series 6 mostly follows the River Song story arc, in that the whole story is about River Song. Series 5 is like the kind of crossover period. Each finale in Series 1 to 4 was like one-upping itself. You've got the Daleks in Series 1, then you got the Daleks and the Cybermen in Series 2, then you got the Master in Series 3, which is still connected to the Daleks because of the Time War, and then in Series 4 you've got the Daleks and Davros. You see there's like a through line there. And then End of Time, he shits himself. And Series 5 kind of keeps up with this power creep because it's the Alliance, right? It's every single alien ever. But actually the real villains of Series 5 secretly are the Silence. We just don't know it yet. And in Series 6 everything becomes clear because we totally distance ourselves from that natural power creep, and instead the whole focus turns on Stephen Moffat's mystery boxes, his River Song, because the story arc for this series is River Song. Similarly to how the story arc for Series 10 is Missy. You see what I mean about things repeating themselves? The Impossible Astronaut is my favourite Stephen Moffat story. And I know that might be calling it a bit early or too late, depending on who you ask, but there is something about the story that I just love. And I say something as if I don't know what it is. I know exactly what it is. Let me tell you what it is. Series 5 is an achievement because he had to follow on from one of the most popular and fan favourite Doctor Who series of all time, Series 4. He had to make something entirely new that also appeased everyone of old. He had to put his stamp on the franchise and introduce Fraud Smith's 11th Doctor as a worthy contender to the follow-up of the beloved David Tennant. All of which is very difficult. But do you know what's even more difficult than that? Doing all that, have it be a success, and then less than 1 month later after finishing, having to just do it all over again. You see, being in charge of Doctor Who is a very tough job and a very thankless job too, because you don't get any breaks and you've just got to keep one-upping yourself, and you've got to do it again and again and again and again, and you've got to start good, you've got to stay good, and you've got to end good too. And so I appreciate the balls on Stephen Moffat after creating just an incredibly wonderful, amazing series of Doctor Who, in my opinion, the perfect series of modern Doctor Who, my favourite series, and then just saying, you know what, let's just go to fucking America, and making his best episode ever, The Impossible Astronaut. The balls, man, the balls. This episode has all of the trademark Moffatisms: monster with a special gimmick, the Doctor's dying, river song, creepy child.
Yes.
I'm scared, Mr. President. I'm scared of the spaceman. Please let me in, Mummy. I'm scared of the bombs.
That child just told you everything you need to know, but you weren't listening.
Did you listen?
I love all of the letters. Oh my god. After establishing such a clear and wonderful dynamic in Series 5 that is just a springboard for more drama and conflict, and Series 6 is off to a thundering start, and it has a wonderful advantage of having 4 characters in it that we really like. By we, I mean the audience. I mean, I could just watch these guys all day. Also, you can call me blinded by nostalgia, but I love how the TARDIS turns invisible just like it did in The Invasion. That made me very happy back then, and it still makes me happy today. Do you see what I mean? This guy's a nerd. He's just like me. I love him. It really is an atmospheric episode. I love the imagery of the astronaut coming out of the water. In fact, I just love the imagery of the astronaut. It basically everything. I love every single shot. The little girl as well, really creepy. All of the phone calls are great. The Oval Office, I mean, I just love how it looks. I also love the prequels that they start doing here. They have little mini-sodes, they have prequel episodes. It's just all really cool. And the silence as well. What was I talking about? It's basically Stephen Moffat doing what Stephen Moffat does, and I love it. Remember how I started this video talking about he kind of just does the same story again and again? This is what I mean, and this is why it's my favorite of his episodes. Day of the Moon is great too, you guys already know. Something though that I do want to point out. This may seem like a little nitpick, but I actually just find it more interesting than anything. In this episode, River Song gives a really nice monologue about how when she first met the Doctor, he knew everything about her and she knew nothing about him. And then there'll be one day, the day that we've already seen, where she sees the Doctor and he knows absolutely nothing about her. It's a, really beautiful, really compelling, emotive, thought-provoking, the list goes on. But something I noticed in my last rewatch is that actually completely goes against the follow-up episode, Let's Kill Hitler. That actually shows River Song's origin story, where it turns out she's a brainwashed Manchurian candidate who already knows everything about the Doctor, so it doesn't really matter that the Doctor knows everything already about her. In fact, it's just completely different to how she describes it, which is a shame too, because I personally prefer that monologue to Let's Kill Hitler. But I'm skipping ahead. First up, we have A Good Man Goes to War. The semi-series finale in this split season is very strange how they did it, but at the same time I like it because it allows for storytelling like this. A Good Man Goes to War does a lot to build the world of the Stephen Moffat era. We're introduced to the Paternoster gang, the Headless Monks. We get a lot of stuff to be resolved as well. River Song is Amy and Rory's daughter? What?!
I'm Melody.
What?!
I'm your daughter.
The action is great, it's just all fucking great. But it's also a very strange episode for me, because we go from this episode and this season, which has all been pretty good, right into Let's Kill Hitler, which is a notable, complete, catastrophic drop-off in quality to absolutely anything we've seen before, and to anything that we will see going forward in Series 6. It's just very odd to me. It's written poorly, it's weirdly edited, it's not funny or unique. It's just a very weird, strange entire episode. But it ties into what I said before, which is that Stephen Moffat tells the same story every single time. And guys, I have a confession to make. Stephen Moffat does not actually tell the same story every single time. I mean, that'd be ridiculous, okay? Do you think someone would notice, you know, apart from me? It's very obviously not true. It's untrue. It's completely wrong.
Not this time.
Stephen Moffat actually tells the same 3 stories. Okay, I know it may be a bit weird to randomly, after talking about Let's Kill Hitler, get massively sidetracked into talking about BBC's Dracula, but I feel like it is the perfect visual explanation for everything that I'm about to talk about. You see, when I said that Stephen Moffat tells the same story again and again, I am technically not fibbing, because he does do just that. You can see the exact same plot beats, thematic resonance, direct ideas and concepts being lifted straight out of one work and being methodically put into all of the others. But with that said, there are most definitely at least 3 distinct type of Stephen Moffat stories, and I feel there is no better way to represent this than by talking about the sadly underrated BBC Dracula. BBC Dracula is an unfortunately underrated show because it is absolutely batshit. It was one of the craziest shows I think I have ever watched. I have definitely seen nothing else like it. And again, arguably, maybe more overlap with Doctor Who than with the actual source material. But anyway, we're just gonna dive right in because hopefully after I have made myself clear, then it would have made itself clear. No, that's not how you say it. BBC Dracula, unlike BBC Sherlock, is not a modern retelling of the Dracula tale. It is not Dracula in the present day, it is Dracula in the past, just like in the story. And at first it does kind of seem like a very similar version to the story. It's told in chapters, it's recounted, first person, first hand, all that type of thing. But then the show does a full 180 where it is revealed that our narrator, John Harker, is actually already dead. He's a vampire and his diary is actually just a bunch of scribbles. Dracula then pulls himself out of a wolf and he's completely naked, and then he tricks Harker into letting him in because, you know, vampires can't be let in unless given permission, and he kills all of the nuns except for Mina, John Harker's fiance, and our true main character, Agatha Van Helsing. And the first episode ends on a cliffhanger where Dracula has them cornered in a basement and it seems like there's no way for them to escape. Overall, this is the most traditional, the most classical Dracula story. It clearly has a lot of differences to the source material, but if you were to point one episode of this 3-episode series to being standard, let's say, then this would be it. This marks one of the Stephen Moffat spectaculars, let's say, which is the standard affair. You know, a regular story, few nice twists, it works, it's solid. It's basically a regular episode of the show. Which brings us then to episode 2, entitled Blood Vessel, which is one of the best names for an episode of TV that I've ever seen, and that will become clear when you realize that this episode is set entirely at sea. Dracula is a passenger on the Demeter, a ship that has been chartered to set sail to England by someone mysterious. They're unknown, I wonder who they are. Dracula isn't the only passenger though, there are a bunch, a whole various cast of characters, and all the while this story is being framed as a narrative within a narrative. It's a story from the past. Dracula is recounting this story to Agatha Van Helsing in the castle of Dracula that we saw in part 1. So while the main story, the A story, aka Dracula with Van Helsing, is set in the present, this story set at sea is a flashback. It's all in the past. And one of the main mysteries in the flashback section is the question, what is in cabin number 9? The kind of obvious answer being that it's Dracula. But still, as you can imagine, as Dracula tells the story to Agatha Van Helsing, he slowly picks off each passenger of the ship and the crew too. One of whom is played by Sacha Dhawan. Fun fact. But as the episode goes on, things become a little bit less clear, let's say. Details start to not quite add up and the story doesn't really make a lot of sense. Agatha Van Helsing is getting dizzy, and the game that she has been playing with Dracula, chess, has mysteriously stopped going her way. It is here, at the midpoint of the episode, where it is revealed that these two storylines are in fact not separate, and it is actually Agatha in cabin number 9. And the whole story has been chronological the whole time, which is a mega massive plot twist that comes out of almost absolutely nowhere. Dracula has been slowly killing Agatha, but now she wakes up and she manages to get all of the crew try and defeat Dracula, which ends with the ship being destroyed and Dracula manages to see himself in a coffin and sink to the bottom of the ocean. This episode marks the second type of Stephen Moffat story, which is what I like to call the clever one. Blood Vessel is a story which is actually very small. It's got a very small location, it's very restrictive, and there aren't a lot of really obvious solutions to the questions. Therefore, the writers Mark Gatiss and Stephen Moffat have to get very creative. They've got to be very clever, and the whole story is clever. It's a very you got me type story. It's very unique, it works a lot within restrictions, makes you think. It's just all round a very thoughtful and reflective and intelligent piece of media. By far, in my opinion, the best episode of BBC's Dracula, which takes us on to part 3. Now, there was one thing, one tiny little thing that I didn't tell you about the ending of part 2, which is that at the very end, as a kind of, cliffhanger stinger, Dracula does actually make it out alive. He resurges on shore, he makes it to England. Finally, he's finally here. He's won. And then something happens.
Welcome to England, Count Dracula.
Is now in the present day.
What kept you? What?
Okay, so do you remember how I said like 3 seconds ago that Dracula isn't like BBC Sherlock, where it's Dracula in the modern age? Well, completely forget I said anything about that, because part 3 is literally Dracula in the modern age, and it is absolutely fucking batshit. You see, this is the third type of Stephen Moffat episode, which is what I like to call the balls to the walls type episode, where it's completely nonsensical, nothing makes any sense, and it's just absolutely fucking crazy. Do you see what I mean? These are the 3 Stephen Moffat archetypes, and this episode is actually so crazy. Let me be clear, it's not bad, by the way. By no means is it bad, but this episode is so crazy that I actually don't want to spoil it. There are so many twists and turns in the whole series that even if you watch it with me telling you these things, you will still be left wondering what is going on. But with part 3 specifically, I actually just want to let people go in completely blind, because this is a just fucking crazy ass episode of a TV show that not enough people have watched, okay? The main point that I'm trying to make is that these 3 episode archetypes are the main stories that Stephen Moffat is trying to tell, and that Let's Kill Hitler is fucking crazy. Another example of an absolutely crazy batshit story would be The Wedding of River Song. At first glance, it seems to be an attempt to recreate the magic of the Big Bang. It's a very clever TM type episode, but also at the same time, I just don't think that's the case. I think this is a case of absolutely batshit, completely crazy, insane Moffat episode rather than a clever TM Moffat episode. And part of my reasoning for this, oddly enough, is actually Sherlock, because this episode shares a lot of similarities with Sherlock's 3rd series finale. There's a lot of imagery that kind of correlates between them, the idea of prison and murder and shooting and all of that. And there's also, on both of them, a massive focus on action. It's kind of schlocky in that way, but also I love it. The Wedding of River Song really does feel like a conclusion or an amalgamation of everything that Series 6 has been building to at this point. We've got callbacks to previous episodes, we've got the silence, we've got Madame Cavard, we've got all of the kind of Americanisms of everyone's hair and crazy shit, and everyone's got guns. Boom, 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 bam, smash, blow, kabam. And it's kind of the end of River Song's arc as well, in that she does show up in series 7, but she didn't really need to. But this episode is where it kind of all wraps up, and it is incredibly overcomplicated and needlessly overstuffed, and I absolutely love it. It isn't trying to be clever, and I think that's where it loses a lot of people, because a lot of people think it is trying to be clever because, Stephen Moffat, he tells the same story over and over again. But he got you, he caught you out, he subverted your expectations, which Stephen Moffat does. He does like to do that quite a bit. And I think this is the part where it either loses you or it gets you, because there's a certain quirk in the Stephen Moffat era of the show where it can be wildly inconsistent. In that one episode, you can get the God Complex and The Girl Who Waited, which are both fairly serious, grounded, emotionally devastating episodes of the show. And then you could have The Wedding of River Song, which is a schlocky action fest where everything gets resolved in a way which you just could possibly never have guessed from the first episode. It's a complete cop-out and totally inconsistent, and yet I love it, which I think it just shows. This is the episode that I would point to be why people shouldn't like it or don't like it. And yet here I am, perfectly willing to acknowledge all of the flaws within this episode and still say, not only do I love it, but I am totally on board for whatever the hell they want to throw at me. Not that one now. Series 7 starts out rough with Asylum of the Daleks, but we're not going to talk about that because this is a positive video where I talk about why I like Stephen Moffat's era. And I do think it is actually a real shame because a lot of Series 7 gets a bad rap. And come on man, it's actually pretty goddamn good! Especially Series 7A. Now, Series 7A takes up a really cinematic look. The posters come first, stories come second type shit. But also just in how the episodes look, there's a real upgrade in style. And then Series 7B it looks totally different again. It is filmic, it's cinematic. Even Asylum of the Daleks, an episode which I'm not the fondest of, is an episode that looks absolutely incredible. The production design is amazing, and that just holds true for the whole rest of Series 7A. But in a way, I like how both of these visual styles clash and also contrast with each other, you know what I mean? Like, I like them both individually, and I like that they're both together in the same series. It's just really cool, you know what I mean? Series 7A is a lot more consistently good when it comes to like the writing and production department. Dinosaurs on a Spaceship is an amazing episode, A Town Called Mercy is an amazing episode, Angels Take Manhattan is an amazing episode, and The Power of Three could have been amazing, but sadly, some guy had to be a prick on set. I mean, comparatively, Series 7B is just not as consistently strong as Series 7A, and yet I enjoy 7B more, you know what I mean? I just like the vibes, because this was the period of Doctor Who, the time. We're 7 years in, right? We're in the 50th anniversary, we're about to have our epic hype major event. I was just along for the fucking ride, bro. I just like the show. Do I really need to defend that? I just like the show. 7A is a lot more serious and grounded. It's a lot more focused on the 11th Doctor's relationship with Amy and Rory, what that does to him, which is really definitive to the character of the fraud, the 11th Doctor. When you take him with Clara, yeah, they've got nice chemistry together, yeah, they're pretty cool, but it does feel like not a real story full of meaning. Does that sound too harsh? I still like it. The 11th Doctor is meant to be with the Ponds. That's their whole dynamic, right? Like the whole structure of Series 5, 6 and 7A is kind of built around that dynamic, and it really is a strong glue that keeps the series feeling tight. And then when you get to Series 7B, it's a lot more loose, it's a lot more free-flowing. And although that can be bad to some people, and I'm not really going to go out to bat to defend Nightmare in Silver, but I just really connect with it, man. I really connect with the snowmen as well. I actually really like this episode, and it sets the vibe for Series 7B really nicely, and I think that's why I like Series 7B as much as I do, because it's just chill like that, you know what I'm saying? Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. I know that my analysis of this series isn't really based on anything objective, mostly vibes. That's because I'm a fucking idiot, and I like hype stuff, and you can't talk about hype and not talk about Day of the Doctor. Day of the Doctor is a story which it doesn't really make the most sense, and yet it is absolutely bloody brilliant. It is the 3 Doctors of the modern show. It has the 10th Doctor, the 11th Doctor, and the Luckily, they get away with it because John Hurt is just so cool. I mean, it kind of fits. In the original 3 Doctors, William Hartnell's barely in it. So in a way, we get pseudo First Doctor in the 3 Doctors and then pseudo 9th Doctor in Day of the Doctor. You know, it's like poetry, it rhymes. Either way, Day of the Doctor is just an absolute achievement in storytelling. And Time of the Doctor isn't necessarily, you know, as an achievement. But you know what? I'm feeling festive. I'll give it a pass. Which brings us on to Series 8. I think to really understand why Series 8 was received as it was, you have to kind of understand the reception to the Matt Smith era as a whole, which was that it was received very positively, but there was kind of a downward trajectory there. Series 7 had released to a mixed reception among fans. General audiences seemed to really connect with it and liked it, and I did seem to really connect with it and like it. But in many ways, Series 8 was seen as a course correction, or at least it was by some fans. I personally love certain directions that Series 8 goes down and really dislike others. I think we should start with what I like, considering this is a praise video, and I think it's rather obvious where we should start. The main man himself, Peter Capaldi, he just absolutely steals the show. I mean, he's just an incredible Doctor. Have you seen anyone ever deny that? Here's a fun fact for you guys. In 2013, Peter Capaldi was my main choice for Doctor. He was my #1 choice of who I wanted to see be the Doctor. That is actually a true fact. So when it was announced that he would become Doctor Who, and especially, oh my god, when we saw him in Day of the Doctor, I was absolutely over the moon. I was unbelievably excited. And I do think that that is a big reason as to why the Moffat era is probably my favourite, because I've just got so many good memories of watching it. Series 8 overall is a very well made series of Doctor Who. Very well directed. It has a lot of core consistent themes and arcs going through it, you know, it's really sticking to its vision. The problem being, I don't really like Clara and Danny, which is a big part of the series. And if that bit falls flat for me, namely the love triangle dynamic between all the 3 characters, I mostly just find it a bit tiresome. It makes it rather difficult for me to get super invested. Couple that with some of the most inconsistent storytelling in the entirety of the whole show, going from absolute banger 10 out of 10 episode to arguably one of the worst of the entire show, if not the worst. The whiplash here is crazy. But do you know what's not crazy? Deep breath. Or should I say that it is crazy? Crazy good. I love this episode, I really do, and I think it is one of the most underrated series premieres of all time. A lot of people really don't like this episode, even people who like Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor don't like this episode, and I can kind of understand why, because it is almost the complete polar opposite to the 11th Hour. And one might ask, if you think that the 11th Hour is the perfect premiere Doctor introduction episode, at least when the modern series is concerned, how can you like Deep Breath if you yourself consider it the polar opposite of that story? And I think the simple answer to that question is that it's very good. Peter Capaldi just instantly steals the show here. He's funny, he's cool, he's badass as fuck, you know, and he takes off the mask, and he's brooding too. And Series 8 has a strange, and sometimes it works, here it works, sometimes it doesn't, obsession with making the Doctor dark. It's like Colin Baker all over again, except that's, you know, objectively amazing. And that rubbed off on audiences. But here in Deep Breath, oh my god, man, does it work. And it's like an extension of the Clockwork Robots from the Girl in the Fireplace episode. The half-face, man, holy fuck. So many funny moments. This episode, in my opinion, bar a few, you know, weird scenes, is amazing. But to a lot of people, it wasn't. And the series kind of got off to a choppy start. In fact, I would agree with the criticism of Series 8 that it is the most inconsistent series of the show, because it goes Deep Breath, which I like, to the Dalek, which is, you know, it's okay, to Robot of Sherwood, which I like again, to Listen, which I've got absolutely no idea whether I love that episode or not. I think I do. To Time Heist, which is the most standard episode of Doctor Who ever. Like, this is like a very solid episode of Doctor Who and the most normal episode of Doctor Who Series 8. To then episode 6, The Caretaker, which I really don't like. To then Kill the Moon, which I really don't like. To then Mummy on the Orient Express, which I absolutely fucking love. To then Flatline, right? Flatline, okay? Flatline is one of the best episodes of the modern show, right? Straight up. It's so goddamn good. And everything that they've been trying to do with Clara works perfectly here. It looks amazing. It's so goddamn good. You go from that episode, right, to In the Forest of the fucking Night. What the hell is going on? It's only, in my opinion, in series 9 where everything finally sets in and the perfect vision for Peter Capaldi's Doctor, the 12th Doctor, and Clara, and that whole dynamic and all of that. In my opinion, series 8 is kind of like a crossover between series 7 or series 7B, should I say, and series 9. Series 9, in my opinion, is where everything for the 12th Doctor becomes a lot more objective. It's the objective 12th Doctor series. And series 8 is this kind of strange, awkward, I don't even know, paddling pool period, would you call it that? The big thing introduced here is Missy, the new female incarnation of the Master, played by the ever wonderful Michelle Gomez. Now, if you've been following along the channel, you may know that my relationship with this character, or specifically this incarnation of the characters, is a bit strange, but I want the first impression that I give when talking about this character, just so you guys know, just straight out of the gate. I don't want anyone to get it twisted. I think Michelle Gomez is absolutely amazing in the role, and I think the idea of a Mary Poppins-esque incarnation of the Master is absolutely brilliant. There's a lot of small moments with Missy, a lot of dialogue moments in series 8, specifically the murder of Osgood, that I think are really amazing. My problem with Missy comes more so in the context of the wider series arc, in that she's great in individual moments, but when the series arc machine starts going and she has to say, "You and I are not so different, Spider-Man."
Why are you doing this?
I need you to know we're not so different.
You and I are not so different.
I'm not like you. You're a murderer.
Well, to each his own.
It just, you know, starts losing me. I think the problem with Missy, if there was only one thing I would change, it's that instead of the Nether Sphere being literal hell for every human that's ever lived for all of time,
Everyone who ever lived, man, woman, and child, is now at my command.
I wish it was just people who were in London for the past 200 years. Now, that is still probably millions of people that Missy has subjected to literal hell, making her basically as bad as the devil, you know, the worst thing that the human mind can possibly comprehend. Missy is on that level in canon in the show, based on how heinous her acts are and how much she takes enjoyment in the suffering of others. She is literally Satan tier when it comes to evil. But just that tiny little change, it turns her from being the devil of trillions, potentially infinite people, to the devil for a couple million people, which, I mean, it's a notable step down, and means that maybe potentially she could possibly be redeemed. But again, my biggest problem with series 8 isn't actually that the Nether Sphere is an idea too horrific for Doctor Who, which it is. It's actually the "Am I a good man?" story arc, because am I the only one who does not find that question particularly interesting? Now, okay, I've talked about this before, and the main thing which I've said is when the Doctor says, "Am I a good man?" it seems rather obvious that yes, the Doctor is a good man. Now, in his current incarnation, he may not be the nicest man, but he is a good man. He is a kind man. He tries to be nice, but he never fails to be kind. He is a good man. And I always really dislike that scene where the Doctor first asks Clara if he's a good man, because it makes sense for the Doctor to ask that question. It makes sense for him to doubt himself, especially where the character is. Like, I like all of the ideas behind the 12th Doctor. What doesn't make sense, and what never made sense, is Clara's response.
I don't know.
The Doctor asks the question, "Am I a good man?" and Clara, who has been with the Doctor throughout the whole of Series 7B, she's been the Impossible Girl, she's met every incarnation of the Doctor, and even if you want to pull the card as like, oh, well, she doesn't remember that, which she should, but if she doesn't, she still went through Day of the Doctor, she still met the War Doctor and the David Tennant Doctor, and witnessed the 11th Doctor go back and save the whole of Gallifrey, and also just the whole events of Series 7B all together. It is so completely disingenuous for Clara to say, I don't know, as if to imply that it's not fucking obvious that the Doctor is a good man. And I feel that this, again, is Stephen Moffat borrowing something from Sherlock, because if you're like me and you've watched both shows a billion times, you will notice that there are thematic parallels here, specifically to a line Detective Lestrade says, where he says, "Sherlock Holmes is a great man, and one day one day he'll be a good one. Now, to me, very obviously, this is like a similar situation to the "Am I a good man" thing from Series 8. And similarly to Sherlock as well, ends with the Doctor saying, "I'm an idiot," which is something that Sherlock would say in Sherlock.
That's how you get your kicks, isn't it? You risk your life to prove you're clever.
Why would I do that?
Because you're an idiot.
I am an idiot.
The point is that Stephen Moffat is kind of lost in the sauce here. He's kind of borrowing from himself, and can you fucking blame him? Because in 2013, this guy was worked to the fucking bone. He had to make a series of Doctor Who. He had to make basically 2 series of Doctor Who. He had to make a special, the Christmas special. Then he had to make the 50th anniversary special, and there is like a billion behind the scenes. There's a whole saga there that I could go into. At one point, the only person who was contracted for the 50th anniversary was Jenna Coleman, and Stephen Moffat actually wrote a draft of the 50th anniversary which only had Clara in it. It was only Clara. Can you imagine if that was the 50th? Not only that, but Stephen Moffat was also working on the Tintin thing, and he was working on a whole series of Sherlock. Can this guy catch a break? And so it is for that reason that even when I have a problem, you know, I don't really like that good man scene. Even when I have that problem, I can still excuse it, you know what I'm saying? I can still enjoy Into the Dalek for what it is, you know, the action, the resurrection of the Daleks callbacks, the regular Dalek callbacks. There is a lot of really interesting and cool stuff that's going on there, but I just, man. And then at the very end, so Dark Water, in my opinion, is basically a filler nothing episode. And then Death in Heaven completely ignores everything that happened in Dark Water, apart from the fact that Missy is in it. Like the 3W Institute, never mentioned again. All of that shit forgotten. Turns into action schlock. Got the cyber brig, which is just, what the hell? And then you have the Doctor's "I am an idiot" speech, which again, this guy Stephen Moffat, he's too lost in the sauce. The Doctor is not an idiot. Now, I don't think many people in the audience really need to be told that, because it's kind of rather obvious in every single scene in Doctor Who, bar like maybe 5. The Doctor is the cleverest person in the room by a long shot. They are a very intelligent character, naturally so. It's why they're actually so difficult to write for, because they're so clever that if you didn't put a bunch of real big obstacles in their way, they'd just be able to solve the plot in about 4 seconds. And so there's something a little unsatisfying with the Doctor coming to the conclusion that he's not a good man, but he's in fact an idiot, because it's just not true. And that's kind of why I just don't really like this Series 8 finale, because it's not true. It brings up a bunch of really horrible ideas. It doesn't appropriately handle them. It just raises a bunch of really awful questions that kind of, you know, just don't sit right in your stomach. And overall, it just feels like a bit of a fumble, which is a shame, because a bad finale shouldn't make the whole series seem bad, because Series 8 has a lot fucking going for it. Namely, the dynamic between the Doctor and Clara. But in my opinion, that dynamic gets a whole lot better when we move on to Series 9. Series 9 is an absolute joy of a season. Number one, it looks beautiful. The visual style here is such an upgrade to Series 8 in my opinion. Now Series 8, what I will give it is that the visual style is very consistent and it doesn't look cheap. I can 100% understand why people like the visual style, the oppressive greys of Series 8, but personally for me it just doesn't really do a lot. Now I understand they're trying to make it gritty, they're trying to make it real, trying to make it darker, but I just prefer the more brown, rustic aesthetic of Series 9. It's just so much more visually appealing, man. It just looks so goddamn good. And also something which really helps. Now Series 9 has a few episodes that I'm not too keen on, namely the opening 2-parter. It's just not really my thing. I wouldn't say it's like a terrible episode. It's just incredibly boring. But even through that, what carries all of the episodes and stories for me, in my opinion, is the dynamic between the Doctor and Clara. No longer hampered by the weird love triangle relationship with Danny Pink. They're really allowed to just kind of love each other, and it's just really nice. They do have a great chemistry. Now, I personally do not subscribe to the camp that hates Matt Smith and Jenna Coleman together, the 11th and Clara. I really like, you know, the 11th Doctor and Clara. That's part of the reason why I enjoy Series 7B, even if a lot of the stories aren't all that great. And it's kind of similar here in Series 9, where some of the stories, they really aren't that great, and yet I'm able to get through them. There are, actually, I should probably mention this, the Zygon 2-parter. I used to really like this when I first watched, well, I say really like, I gave it a 7 out of 10 when I first watched it all the way back in 2015, 9 years ago. Nowadays, I actually can't stand these episodes. I just, they give me the ick. Do you know the ick? Remember that shit? These episodes weird me the hell out. They're just cringe, in my opinion. I just don't like it. Under the Lake I have a few criticisms of because it's mostly just setup. But Before the Flood is so good, you know, I kind of just don't really care. I just kind of just want to give Under the Lake a pass. And I have talked about why I like this finale just so much. I mean, and this is me talking about Hellbent, not even Heaven Sent. I've just talked about Hellbent and why I like Hellbent as much as I do for ages and ages and ages. But Heaven Sent, holy shit, man. In a series that is defined so well by the Doctor and Clara's dynamic, it only reaches its peak when that's all taken away. Now, I will do a little bit of pushback. I will say that Heaven Sent doesn't work really well as a first episode to Doctor Who. You guys know me. I'm usually the non-chronological guy, just start whenever. But when I see a lot of people saying, just watch Heaven Sent and don't watch any other episode of Doctor Who, I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Oh, whoa. Okay, chill the F out. Heaven Sent is an absolutely great episode, though. It is kind of that perfect epitome of clever Stephen Moffat. It's basically a Sherlock episode, but Doctor Who. But it's allowed because he's stealing from himself. Like the rest of Series 9, absolutely beautiful production design. The direction here by Rachel Talalay is just, she's so good. And Face the Raven, when you're first watching it, you're like, well, this is all kind of weird. I mean, how are they even going to wrap this all up? And then you get to that final scene and then you get it, right? And I really think that episode is quite beautifully written, especially when you get to some of the lines towards the end. I love, it's not quite the final scene, but it's the almost final conversation between the Doctor and Clara, where the Doctor says, I don't care. Clara responds, liar, you always care. And has that line that's a callback to The Beast Below, where it's, I forget what it is. She says, your reign of terror will stop at the sight of the first crying child or something like that. It's just beautiful stuff, you know what I mean? Sleep No More. Now, you can take the piss out of Sleep No More, and I will too occasionally every now and then. But what you can't make fun of is the fact that it's trying something new. You know, it's a unique episode, entirely unique. It's doing something cool, it's doing something new. Yeah, it doesn't entirely stick the landing, but Sleep No Moreers, stand up, people. Who's with me? Again, the strengths of this series are Peter Capaldi's excellent acting, Jenna Coleman's excellent performance, their dynamic, their relationship with each other, and the big problem, in my opinion, would probably be the series arc. I'm not too big into Ashilda and the themes of, you know, immortality that are prevalent throughout the whole series, you know, living forever. Just not very intellectually stimulating for me, just personally. That's a me thing. But this series is definitely a W, and Series 8 is a W too, you know. Series 8 has a few fumbles, this series has a few fumbles. It's still goddamn good, okay? And even in the worst episodes, there are still hype as fuck moments. I almost skipped past it. The Zygon inversion speech coming from someone who doesn't like that episode is so fucking good. And it's performed beautifully, it looks beautiful, incredible direction from that scene, and of course an incredible performance from Peter Capaldi. But here is where I will insert my conspiracy theory. Yep, everyone get your conspiracy hats on. Here is my Series 9 conspiracy theory. Let me know in the comments below if you agree with me. Now, The Girl Who Died and The Woman Who Lived is a kind of meh two-parter. Not really a lot happens in it. There's some really weird moments, but you know, mostly inoffensive, you know, you're kind of enjoyable. However, in part 1, The Girl Who Died, there is a certain scene that is standout, a certain scene that sticks with you, or me should I say, and probably stuck with you as well. That of course being the scene where the Doctor realizes where he got his face from, and they flash back to Series 4. It's by far the best scene of the episode and one of the best scenes of Series 9. And oddly, even though Part 2 does not have a Stephen Moffat writing credit, Part 1 does. Okay, then let's skip to The Zygon Invasion and The Zygon Inversion, written by Peter Harness, who also wrote Kill the Moon. Yay! However, Part 2, The Zygon Inversion, has a writing credit from Stephen Moffat. I just find it mighty odd that Part 1 of the story, which has one scene that is standout, has a writing credit for Stephen Moffat, while Part 2 doesn't. And then Part 2 for The Zygon Inversion has a writing credit for Stephen Moffat where there's one scene that's standout, but Part 1 doesn't. So what I did was I decided to go a bit deeper. I decided to delve a bit deeper, and what I found was a Radio Times interview with Peter Harness where he pretty much said that yes, Stephen Moffat was the one who wrote that speech, just as I fucking thought. So basically what I'm saying is, my conspiracy theory is that in these kind of bad episodes, Stephen Moffat swooped in like a guardian angel and wrote a god tier scene just to save them. because he's goated like that. And I think Series 9 as a whole, with it trying to do so many unique things and having such a clear vision, such great writing, I do think, and as I said, I also think for Series 8, that this is a W series. Which leads us on to the finale, the final Doctor Who series produced by Stephen Moffat, where he was the showrunner. I don't really know how to introduce this. Series 10, featuring Pearl Mackie as Bill Potts and Matt Lucas as Nardole, a new companion introduced in one of the Christmas, actually both of the Christmas specials that took place in the year-long gap. Yes, there was a year-long gap between Series 9 and 10, and it shows. Series 10 is a series which I absolutely adored when I first watched it, and Series 9 was a series that I kind of disliked when I first watched it. I shouldn't say disliked, I was disappointed, and Series 10 felt like a real course correction. And so imagine my shock when a few years ago now I went back and rewatched Series 9 and 10 and found myself really enjoying Series 9 and kind of not really vibing with Series 10. I mean, damn. I hate that they spoiled all of the big reveals. I really do. And this series, while feeling a lot like regular Doctor Who again, which is something that I had missed with the more experimental nature of Series 8 and 9, it doesn't feel quite as in-depth. Pearl Mackie as Bill is great, but she just isn't Clara. You know, her character isn't really that thought out. Nardole is cool, he's funny. Nothing in this series is like bad or anything. It's just regular. And frankly, to me, that is good enough as well. But I would be lying if I didn't say that as my appreciation of Series 9 grew, I kind of did stop liking Series 10 quite as much. It's still a really good series. It's still probably at least A tier. You got some absolute bangers in here, and it's certainly far more consistent than both Series 8 and Series 9. But also some of the episodes are just not that interesting. The Eaters of Light. Tell me one thing about this episode. I mean, I can tell you one thing about this episode. It's written by Rona Munro, who wrote Survival. It's got a really terrible gay romance joke in it. That's all I can tell you about this episode. But that's kind of the vibe of Series 10, in that the pilot is, you know, a pretty consistent run-of-the-mill Doctor Who episode. Smile, pretty consistent run-of-the-mill Doctor Who episode. Thin Ice is pretty cool. Knock Knock, I actually do really like Knock Knock. I think this one's really underrated. Oxygen, it's alright, I don't know. And then we pretty much get to the finale, which is, in my opinion, where a lot of the love of Series 10 comes from. And in my opinion, it's well deserved, because this fucking finale is so goddamn peak, holy shit. I think it goes to show just how good the Moffat era is, that this is probably on the lower end, and I still really enjoy about 9/10 of it, right? Like the pilot. I say that's a run-of-the-mill episode, but there are like 5 to 10 laugh out loud moments in it. You've got the Movellans, which was absolutely mind-blowing for me at the time that was in it. And in general, it's just a really enjoyable episode of Doctor Who. But when you compare it to World Enough in Time and the Doctor Fools, I mean, it's almost unfair that the Stephen Moffat era sets such high standards for itself. You remember how a little bit ago I said that I wasn't the biggest fan of the Series 8 finale? Well, luckily, Mr. Moffat heard me, and so he decided to create this episode, which is pretty much the same as the Series 8 finale, except objectively better in every conceivable way. World Enough in Time is about a main character who is killed off in the very first scene, dragged off to the underworld by the Cybermen, slowly converted in a hellish environment. All the while, Doctor and his companion above tried to save the companion, finding out more and more about how this location which they have found themselves works, eventually climaxing with a master reveal. The difference being that World Enough in Time is actually good. You see, a big problem with Dark Water is that, ironically, it is treading water, in that it's really dragged out, really fillerish, and a lot of it doesn't matter. World Enough in Time completely prevents this by introducing the time dilation concept, which is A, really interesting, and B, a great excuse for why the Doctor doesn't just instantly save the day. This sounds a bit odd, but in Nightmare in Silver, there's a real problem with that episode, which is that the Doctor, who should really care about protecting, you know, children, doesn't take the children who are with him out of the highly dangerous war zone for no reason. And similarly, in Dark Water, the Doctor doesn't really have any reason to be going as slow as he's going, outside of the fact that he's curious, maybe? But in World Enough in Time, the Doctor is moving as quickly as he can. The only problem being that it's not quick enough because of the time dilation. And then by the time the Doctor does make it, it's already too late. And there is an absolutely heartbreaking, hard-hitting, just ultimate cliffhanger. Stephen Moffat's got a massive grin on his face, typing out Genesis of the Cybermen. We all fucking see you. And basically, everyone who's a Doctor Who fan is having a pretty great time. Now, of course, I can bring up a few complaints. The fact that this was all spoiled through the marketing, not even through leaks, through the marketing, was very disappointing. But still, it is definitely a very high quality episode of Doctor Who. And when you rewatch it, as I have like a million billion times, the fact that you know the twist doesn't really undercut it. And now onto the Doctor Fools, the final episode of the Peter Capaldi era, or so I want it to be. And this is an episode which was oddly controversial when it came out. Can we all agree that this episode is great now? Is that something we can agree on? Hopefully. It's just the ultimate conclusion. There's a few cheesy Moffatisms in there. It wouldn't be the same without them. Peter Capaldi is an absolute badass. The direction from Rachel Talalay is god tier. Holy shit. And some of the speeches here, the dynamics between all the characters, they're all just so engaging. Wonderful setting, wonderful imagery. I mean, just what's not to love? Actually, you know what? That's just my tagline for the Moffat era. What's not to love? Ends on a great cliffhanger too, with the first Doctor showing up. All of the arcs get resolved. Missy dies. It's just great. And damn, we're already done. We've talked about all the episodes. So that's about it. I've gone through all of the episodes. I've explained why I've liked them all. I've even explained why I haven't liked any of them. What's more there to say? Quite a lot actually, because I think it's time for me to explain why exactly this era is above the rest. Why out of the three, actually four now that we have, this era stands alone as my favorite. Because if you don't know, I actually like all the eras. Yes, I like the new series, Series 14. I think it's really goddamn great. I like all of the stuff they're doing. I like the look at the new series, not new series, the new Christmas special. It all looks really goddamn cool. I love Space Baby, 73 Yards, Devil's Cord, Boom, Dot and Bubble, Rogue was great, Legend of Ruby Sunday, Empire of Death was pretty cool too, Church on Ruby Road was great, The Giggle was great, Wild Blue Yonder was great, Star Beast was just okay. And as you guys all know, I've already made a video on it, I think the Chibnall era is pretty cool as well too. In fact, I would go out on a limb to say that, generally speaking, is pretty great. Which leaves only the Russell T Davies 1 era, which I secretly hate. Just kidding, I love it too. But I really do think that there's no comparison, that the Moffat era is the best. And that may, you know, leave a few people scratching their heads, because I was a little critical, especially towards Series 8. But the truth is that even that series, which is, it's probably tied or just above Series 2 for my least favorite series of the modern show. I mean, I still really like it. It's not like I dislike something just because it is my least favorite out of my favorite show ever. Someone's got to be at the bottom. And I do still think that Series 2, I mean, it just etches below. Is that a phrase? And I mean, just because an era of the show has a series which I'm not too keen on, relatively speaking, doesn't mean I don't still like it. As I just said, I like the Russell T Davies 1 era, and that has probably my least favorite series of the modern show. I still like it, but I also think that the Moffat era has higher peaks than the Russell T Davies 1 era. I think there are just straight up more episodes that I consider great. There's longer stretches which I consider amazing. And overall, the vibe and understanding of the show, I just connect more with Stephen Moffat. He just gets what the show's about. I can't hate. Why would I? Additionally, something I should say which really factors in to why I like the Moffat era so much is that it is so long. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 6 series right there. 6 full series of the show. 7 years, right? That is far longer than Rusty Davies 4 series and 4 years on the show. So the Moffat era has higher peaks than the Rusty Davies 1 era and has more content than Rusty Davies 1 era. The only thing I would say is that at certain points, the Stephen Moffat does reach lower lows than the Rusty Davies 1 era. But I don't know. I don't really mind. Now, right now, I am holding back the urge to go full Chibnall Defense Force and talk about how Series 12 is kind of on the level of Series 9 to me, or maybe Series 9 is just a little bit above, and how the average episode in Series 11 or Series 12 is about the same as the average episode in about Series 8, 9 or 10. And I could go full Chibnall Defender mode, but you know what? I've got a whole video about that. This is the video for the Stephen Moffat era, and for that, what I will say is let's do a quick ranking of all the eras. Yippee! Number 1, we got the Stephen Moffat era. As the title of the video suggests, this is my favorite. I really connect with it. I really like the two doctors that they've got for, I mean, I like all of the doctors, but I really like these guys. I like the ethos behind the show. I like how Stephen Moffat understands and tackles the characters, both old and new, that he creates. It is my number one favorite era of the modern show, not of Doctor Who in general. Let's not get ahead of ourselves here, people. Number two, I'm gonna go for the Rusty Davies 1 era. This is my second favorite. It's just really consistently good. It's a new spark for Doctor Who, a breath of fresh air after just fucking nothing for like 16 years. It's brand spanking new. It's got all that Dalek fan service. It's got that edge. It's got that grit. I love it. Great stuff. And then third, I'm actually gonna throw a curveball in and say Rusty Davies 2 has just about edged out the Chibnall era for me. I personally prefer Rusty Davies 2 right now because I've just really fucking vibed with season 1. Yeah, I didn't really like the ending to The Giggle. Yeah, the Star Beast. I mean, the Star Beast is the worst episode of the era and it's not even that bad. I just really connected with this era already. It feels like we're taking the show in a new direction while also going through familiar territory. I really am in love with everything we're doing with the show so far. Yeah, it might not quite have reached the heights of the original series 1 or 4. That's not true. It's mostly held back by its format. If season 1 had 13 episodes, I mean, it would probably be the best series of the show. Modern show, I should say. I'm really connecting with all the behind the scenes stuff as well. I just really like this new era of the show, which leaves, sadly, number 4, the Chibnall era. It is still a great era. I will always defend it, you guys. But by process of elimination, it's gonna have to be at the bottom simply because there's just not enough content. How many episodes are there in the Moffat era? Like 70 or something like that? There's only like 30 in the Chibnall era. The Chibnall era only has one Doctor. In my opinion, it's still a breath of fresh air. It's still something new. It's still something really cool. I like a lot of the stuff they do in it. I don't like some of the stuff they do in it. Overall, I did really connect with the Chibnall era, but by process of elimination, I'm gonna just have to slide it at the bottom there. It's still good, you guys. But that's about all I really have to say. That was cool. Okay guys, let's wrap it up. Let's play the outro. And that's about it. I hope you all enjoyed the video. It was really fun to put together. This was a more conversational video than I usually do before. Are you serious? See, this is why I don't do conversational videos. I'm a fucking idiot. Have done before is what I should say. Anyway, I had a lot of fun putting this together. It is very nice to finally talk about something I like for a change, although that is kind of all I do. I just love Doctor Who, man. Who can blame me? And I also want to give a massive apology for taking the entire month of August off. I promised you guys that Summer DW Fan 91 was going to be epic, and then I left for 2 weeks. I'm sorry, you guys. If you guys read the community post, you would know that I was ill for a few weeks, and then I immediately went on a road trip away, so I was away from my setup for quite a while. But I still am incredibly sorry that I couldn't upload as much content as I wanted to last month. Trust me guys, it's gonna be better soon. Woohoo! I'm working on some absolutely insane projects that I can't wait for you guys to see. I hope you really enjoy them. And with all that said, I hope you all who are watching enjoyed the video. I certainly did. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And with all that said, I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.